We're broadcasting from Marrakesh, Morocco, here at the UN Climate Summit, or COP22, the conference of the parties. The high-level talks began earlier this morning. The United Nations has announced that 2016 is very likely to be the hottest year on record, surpassing 2015, which had been the warmest year since records began. World Meteorological Organization Secretary General Peter Tellus spoke here in Marrakesh, Morocco on Monday.
On instrumental records so far, and if you look at the first 9 months of this year, we are fairly high up again, and we are breaking all the records. And it's likely that we are going to reach this year 1.2 degree warming level, and we are going to a bit the wrong direction if you think of this 1.5 degree warming level, which was agreed last year in Paris.
Meanwhile, Reuters is reporting Donald Trump is seeking ways to quickly withdraw the United States from the Paris Accord to combat climate change. Trump is a longtime climate change denier who's described global warming as a Chinese hoax. On Monday, the U.S. Special Envoy on Climate Change, Jonathan Pershing, revealed that no one from Trump's transition team has reached out to him to discuss U.S. climate policy.
I don't really have any good insight for you. We are not yet in touch with the transition team. As I noted, they have not yet been named for our agency. We're waiting to talk with them. I anticipate that will happen soon after I return to Washington. But in the absence of that, we don't have any information to offer about our expectations for them. They haven't been in touch with us.
To talk more about the UN climate talks here in Marrakesh, Morocco, and the significance of Donald Trump's election on the world's effort to combat climate change, we're joined by two guests. Daniel Kamen is Science Envoy for the U.S. State Department, Professor of Energy at the University of California at Berkeley. And Asad Rehman rejoins us today, spokesperson for Friends of the Earth International. He's based in Britain. We welcome you both to Democracy Now! Daniel Kamen, let's begin with you. You're the Science Envoy here of the State Department. John Kerry is expected to arrive in a couple of hours here at the UN Summit. There are a number of world leaders here. The King of Morocco just passed behind us. A new leader has been chosen in the United States, not by popular vote. Still, Hillary Clinton, I believe, has around 2 million votes more, and the votes are still being tallied. But when it comes to the Electoral College, it looks like Donald Trump will be the next president. Your response as the climate envoy, the science envoy for the State Department?
Well, sticking to the climate story, I'd like to think that any new head of state, from whatever ideological background, will recognize that the science of climate change is really undisputable. I've been a member of the IPCC, the group that does the research to inform the UN, for 15 years. And the hottest year records fall year after year. The economics of clean energy are overwhelmingly positive in terms of the low prices of solar and wind, the ability to meet both large-scale energy systems, the U.S. and China, but also off-grid options, and to really show that clean energy is actually a populist tool to bring resources to people who need it. So I'd like to think that message will make it through, but we'll see what happens as the politics plays out in D.C.
So what does it mean for this summit? Donald Trump has been very clear. One of his first acts would be to pull out of the Paris Climate Agreement.
Well, thankfully for this summit in Morocco, we're still under the current Obama administration, where the U.S. is playing a strong role to highlight goals for 2030 in the United States through the Clean Power Plan, but most importantly, to be a partner overseas and around the world with governments like Morocco and Kenya that want to develop clean energy plans. You're asking about what will happen at the next COP, and opinions vary widely. Pulling out of the COP legally is a process that would take some time, because not only was it signed and ratified under a month ago, but there is a process to pull out that takes a few years. The challenge is that you can be a passive-aggressive obstructionist by not sending a delegation, by not coming through with U.S. obligations. And to my mind, that would really be turning your back on economic winning opportunities.
Now, just to be clear, it would take, what, 3 years and then another year, which would be 4 years, which is the term of a president, if he wanted to pull out.
That's true, but that's for the legal process to remove the U.S. as an official member. There's lots of steps along the way that are important. We've seen that the thing that arguably made Paris a success last year was a non-COP event. It was the APEC summit in 2014 when President Obama and Premier Xi signed a G2 of climate agreement, if you will, a bipartisan plan to limit emissions and to lead the world in this area. That led the way to Paris. And so there are very important actions that could be taken that could slow things down.
Can you explain, when President Obama talks about a peaceful transition, I think many people just mean, you know, that he's saying people won't take up guns in opposition, something like that. But actually, it has a very specific meaning. What I am certainly coming to learn here in Morocco from many people around the world, especially people in the United States, that he will not introduce anything new in this lame duck kind of period, which means, wasn't the U.S. here supposed to introduce the decarbonization plan 2050, and now this is just not being introduced?
No, I don't think that's quite right, because the U.S. has highlighted a number of commitments that it made in the past months. There's a number of significant tranches of funding, $500 million here, another $750 million coming. Those things are going to happen during the next days. But what you're talking about, I think, is the really important effort, because what we've learned in the climate process is that your 2020 goals and 2030 goals must be enabling of 2050. They can't be goals unto themselves. And the challenge is that right now the U.S. has a well thought through plan. If you don't follow through on the elements of that, then you do put the larger process of decarbonizing at home and being an enabler and an assister around the world in jeopardy.
I've also heard that the Department of Energy had a significant delegation that was coming here, and it was cut by a number of people. Why would the Obama administration not double down as opposed to just start to give in to the new administration?
Yeah, so I haven't heard the details of that. I know the State Department team will be significant. I've met a number of colleagues from the Department of Energy, assistant secretaries, deputy secretaries, who are here very much supporting this clean energy domestic and abroad plan. But transitions are often uncertain, and the idea that you can be peaceful militarily, but not necessarily cooperative, is certainly one of the areas where we worry, because diplomacy is not an overnight process. It requires building trust, and that's one of the things that we'll have to see what plays out.
Do you think if Bernie Sanders was the candidate, he would have won this election against Donald Trump?
I do. I don't think that's really that ambiguous. When you look at the poll numbers that were head-to-head Trump and Sanders, they were very clearly 10, 15 points for Senator Sanders. And the second feature is that we now know in retrospect, we didn't necessarily know at the time, but that many of the things that propelled Mr. Trump were a backlash and anger and a appeal to undereducated Americans. And Mr. Sanders has spoken eloquently to the needs of lower income Americans in ways that most candidates for president, Secretary Clinton, have not. And I do think he would have been a powerful candidate in this race, but it's all speculation and hindsight now.
Well, let's go to former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders speaking on Face the Nation about Donald Trump's climate policy.
What astounds me, and I hope this changes very quickly, is we now have a president-elect who actually does not believe that climate change is real. I worry very much what this means for our kids and our grandchildren and the future of this planet. And millions of people are going to have to tell him, Mr. Trump, you are dead wrong.
Bernie Sanders' response to that, Daniel Kamen.
And I think he's right on the money. To be a climate denier in 2016 is to simply ignore science. A businessman is supposed to be flexible and thoughtful about opportunity. Clean energy is an economic boom, and it's a boom for equity around the planet. And to turn your back on that is to put ideology over simple, good, clean energy business and clean energy jobs.